All right, guys, we are live. Happy Friday. Today is, and I got to check again, I just checked it. Today is Friday, May 27th. You're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us on Twitter at our hashtag CMGR Hangout. Please head over to our website at www.mycmgr.com. Click on Participate. There you can fill out a form and let us know what you want to hear. And if you want to be on the show, let us know too. It's you and your ideas that keep this going, and Sherry and I just kind of help facilitate. So today's topic is about how purpose will power future online communities. And a little write-up that Sherry did talked about the fact that, as industry or as community professionals, we often hear people ask how to get their community more engaged, and Sherry likes to step back and say, hey, let's take a look at first, why is the community there in the first place? They don't exist just because they want them to. They have to have some sort of purpose. And recently, Bill Johnston, who's with us today, wrote an article titled "Purpose Will Power Future Online Communities." So if you haven't had a chance to read that, definitely make sure to check it out. It really explains the model of purpose in online communities, and we're going to dive into some of that today. So before we dive in, love to just have everyone say hi and introduce themselves. Hey, guys.
Hey, Brew. Thanks for having me. My name is Patrick O'Keefe. I wrote a book called Managing Online Forums. I blog at managingcommunities.com, host a Community Signal podcast. I love community. I've been managing communities for about 16, 17 years, moderating for a little longer, and I'm really glad to be here today with a group of people that I really respect, so thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We always love your smiling face and your deep insights. So, hey, Jen.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. My name is Jen Lebowitz. I'm from Health Union, where I am Senior Director of Community Development. And we own and manage, now it's up to, I think, 8 online communities that help people dealing with chronic health conditions. So thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us.
Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Bill Johnston, founder of Structure 3C. And a longtime community, architect. I've built large-scale communities for Tech Republic, Dell, and Autodesk, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today to talk about this intersection of purpose and online communities.
I love that community architect thing. I was on LinkedIn. I was like, I want to change my title. I said, oh, community architect, and then I saw Bill. I said, he's got it already. Damn, Bill, community architect.
There can be two. There can be two.
Yeah, there can only be one.
You don't have to cut my head off. Unless you want to.
Hey everyone, I'm Sherry Rhodey. I am the community manager at Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, and I also co-produce CMGR Hangout here with Brew.
Hey everybody, I'm Brew, Director of Awesome at Be the Change Revolutions, also co-producer here with Sherry. So happy to be here today. Let's just dive into the first question, and without getting too lost, how can we define purpose? Let's talk about that.
Don't everybody go at once.
Bill, it was your piece that kind of kicked us off. So
yeah,
go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I can go. It looks like I may not be popping up in the feed. Hopefully that's not some sort of issue with my camera. You could totally get lost in it, just like we could spend the next 4 days trying to define online community, right? But for me, the question begs a little bit of background, which is for the last 9 months, I've been a fellow with something called Life Reimagined, which is an institute that the AARP is funding to talk about how to essentially maximize quality of life for everyone. And so this concept of purpose is something that is very intrinsic to the institute, and in particular the work of Richard Leider. And if you haven't seen him, for the show notes for this, I can certainly share a couple of videos. But at the end of the day, purpose is, Richard likes to say, the answer to the question, what gets you out of bed in the morning, really. It's just ultimately what drives you, not so much, it is what you're passionate about, but it's this intersection of what you're passionate about, what you're capable of doing, and what the world needs, right? is how I would describe purpose as succinctly as possible. And then how that intersects with communities, I think, is something that we'll unpack a little later.
Awesome. Patrick, you got anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think purpose is what the member gets out of their commitment to the community. So, when people take the time and become long-term members of a community, they commit to something. How it impacts their life, how it improves their life or improves whatever they're pursuing is sort of the purpose of the community for them. So I think that's a really simple way of defining it, but I like that definition because we think about we think about how the community serves the business. We think about the ROI of the community, but the important question, I think, or one of the most important questions is what does the community provide to the members? So whatever they're getting out of it, if it's helping them on their career path, if it's helping them with a temporary moment in their life, could be a negative moment, could be homelessness, could be a positive, could be pregnancy, moving, a new job, any number of things. If it's serving that purpose, then I think that's what the community exists for.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think, to put it at its most simple, or break it down to its most simple element, I would say it's probably the person or the community's why. So the reason that you're doing the thing, or what you're looking to get out of it, like Patrick said. I like to refer to the Simon Sinek TED Talk called Start With Why. I think he goes into some really good things there, and he talks about how it's basically based on your beliefs. So I think that's a pretty simplified way of getting at it.
Awesome. So, in reading your article, Bill, we picked out this piece where you talked a little bit about the difference between community engagement and manipulation. So let's talk about that. What is the difference between engagement and manipulation? And because to me, I guess sometimes I feel like they might have some lines that cross a little bit.
Sure. I mean, the main point I was trying to make is, we've looked at different techniques within online communities to kind of maximize value and participation, at least for the last 10 years or so. And in the last few years in particular, you're seeing sort of this really, in a lot of communities, this sort of heavy focus on reputation management and applying game mechanics to certain parts of the community. And I think when not done in a thoughtful way, they can be incredibly manipulative, right? You see a lot of articles around, psychological hacks to increase engagement, which are sort of written in a very one-sided way, right? Like how do you poke the members to get them to do more stuff for you for free? And the real intent for me with writing the article was, we don't have to be in a zero-sum game mentality anymore. Like we can design these experiences so everybody wins and everybody gets value. It's just a matter of taking the time to do so, right? So for me, the manipulation engagement sort of question is really around, is it one-sided value? Is it a value sink, if you will, or is everybody getting value from a community interaction?
I think for me it's intent.
Yeah, I would say.
Go ahead, Jen.
Go for it.
No, please go first. We don't want to go in the same order every time.
All right. Okay, I'll go. I would say, again, to put it simply, like engagement could be where you're thinking of it as mutually beneficial. And that's what you're looking to get out of the community members. So it actually makes me think of, in the way that Bill talks about it, makes me think of, and my background is in education, so the Freirean model of education, and Paulo Freire created this dialogic model where everybody has something, or the belief is that everybody has something to bring to the table and everybody has something that they can learn. That's both teachers and students. And I think it's kind of, that could translate to what we're talking about with engagement, is we're there to give something to the community, get something from them. And the community members, same thing. They're there for what they can gain as well as what they can give. So that's how I would differentiate between engagement and manipulation.
From the community professional side, I think of intent. I think of what we're trying to do. When I read some of these articles that talk about addiction or habit formation, I just go, ugh, that's not why I got into this. That's not what I'm here to do, and that's not what I'll ever be here to do. I want people to come to the community, not because it fires off the pleasure center in their brain because of some social trigger that was designed in the software, but because they're getting some sort of value or delight from the community itself. And I think there's an important difference there between designing addictive features and addictive notifications and things that keep people on the community longer for the sake of increasing page spent or time spent on the page, and actually creating valuable features and community offerings. So again, I think it's important. Social science is a great thing. It's a part of our practice, but there is a responsibility that comes with that, where you can use it for bad, you can use it for evil, and I think it's on us to kind of keep ourselves in check and to call out other people who are not doing so that our space is seen as a good in the personal, professional, every world, and not just seen as another manipulative game. I don't want to be the in-app purchasing of the business world or of the marketing world. I think we have something great to bring to the table, and I think we lose some of that when we simply focus on the act of keeping people on the keeping people on the page for as long as we possibly can.
You think there, so I totally dig what you're saying, Patrick, especially on the lines of, I just thought of that quote, with great power comes great responsibility, as you were talking about, the manipulation side of things. But, can that stuff also aid, like in your community, right? Like, so is it all bad if you're not using it to be lazy? Meaning, if you are making sure you have great content, great community, great engagement, as some of those more psychological tactics, is there a do you believe there could be this balance where they just sort of plus one what's already going on? I'm really asking anybody that, really, but
I mean, I'm not sure if I understand the question totally, plus one what's going on, but I think there is a balance. And again, I like to go back to intent because I think it speaks to what we're here to do. So yes, I mean, slick software by nature is easier to use and maybe more fun to use, but I think that there has to be substance there. And so when you are building in these amazing communities and you have these amazing conversations and value, and there's a lot of great things going on in this space, that certainly backs up excellent, well-designed software. But I do think there are cases where it can be exploitive, where there might not be a lot of substance. It may just be a way of pushing people onto the page and getting people onto the site as long and as much as you possibly can. And I think it's important to, have a balance and be aware of what you're causing. And also to allow people to control the experience to some extent too, as far as disabling some of those features and disabling some of those prompts that you can put on your community and giving them more power to their experience. Because although addicts won't necessarily cut themselves off, it's a good thing to give them the opportunity. And I think we all have to think about who we're catering to. Scott Moore said something really good when I spoke to him about this. He said, it's easy to fall in love with the adoration of addicts. And people who will simply tell you that everything you're deploying is great because they love your community. So, I mean, if we think about it in the context of responsibility and in people not necessarily knowing what they need or what they want, as Steve Jobs said something along those lines years ago, I think we have a responsibility, since we understand the space and understand some social psychology, to deploy that responsibly.
I mean, just building upon what Patrick said, to me it all, it's all part of the design process when you're designing community platforms, experiences, and programs to layer on top of them. And, Patrick, you hit upon a couple of key points. One is, it really does come down to intent, right? Are you trying to deliver sort of mutually reciprocal value, or are you trying to exploit and extract as much as possible from a member or extended member base? And then the ability to be somewhat transparent about those controls, I think will become increasingly more important. And then, potentially disabling or through the transparency allowing someone to kind of opt in to participation could be helpful moving forward as well. and I know we'll get to this, but again, like the intent with me writing the piece wasn't so much to pan reputation management or game mechanics, and in particular, I think reputation management is incredibly important and provides a lot of value for communities, especially when we start to talk about federated community experiences where people partner around a particular topic instead of trying to drive participation, just to one portal. I mean, I think federated reputation and federated communities will become a really interesting space to explore in the coming months and years. But this idea of designing for a member to discover and then refine their purpose, and then to express their purpose in the context of the community itself, which requires the community to be conscious of its purpose and opportunities to allow members to express and actualize their purpose. Like, I think it's kind of the next level for me in community building and design, right? Where you've gone beyond just the basic, interaction model. You've gone beyond building reputation over time. You've gone beyond figuring out how to employ game mechanics for onboarding or for spurring participation, and you're really talking about for certain instances how you're building lifelong, mutually beneficial relationships in these communities.
So let's jump into our third question here, which is, how can we identify purpose for community members?
For me, I think that's going back to, or kind of digging in and finding out what their why is. I'll use an example of this organization that I founded with a friend, Kara Rosansky. It's called RIP-LB, and it was to fight the heroin epidemic on Long Island. And so we have a bunch of people who got started with us, and there were many different whys, so to speak. So for some people, it was connecting with people who were like-minded, and for other people it was because they want their community to be safe and healthy for their children to grow up in, and then for some people it was like a cathartic healing thing if they've lost a child to the disease of addiction. But so they all had different whys, which you get just through conversation really and getting to know your community members, at least in my experience, but they all had the same goal. They wanted to make a difference in this epidemic. So I think that could be a helpful example, and really just through conversation and getting to know your community members, kind of digging in, finding what their why is.
Samuel Helick is a user onboarding consultant, really smart guy about onboarding, and he has this image stuck to his Twitter page where it says, "People don't buy products, they buy better versions of themselves." And I think that's really interesting and helpful to think about as we create communities, because we have this stupendous opportunity to help people be better at whatever there is they're seeking. It can be a hobby, it could be board games, it could be a professional thing, it could be a personal thing, but they don't come to a community thinking necessarily that I'm just joining a community, I just want to post. They want to do something, they want to be something, especially in professional communities. So how can we help them be that better version of themselves? So I think if you think about how your company can feed into that better version of themselves, whether that be products, services, offerings, whether that be advice from the community, networking through the community, how can you help them be that better version of themselves, and then kind of allow that to guide your strategy and your outreach and your onboarding?
I would say the question of how, basically you can't discover someone's purpose for them. I mean, it's something that the individual needs to discover and define. I will give a specific example. So as part of the Life Reimagined Fellowship, which clearly I'm still working on, we're actually developing this purpose model, at least for our community. And we're working on a community that's essentially around expressing purpose via your vocation. And so what we found is, and this is still early days, and we're just getting the initial results from a pilot we ran a couple of weeks ago, but what we found is community can be helpful in discovery of purpose, but then also in refining and finding outlets to express purpose as well. So with our cohort of 150 people, we're looking at various ways that actually kind of materialized over the course of our 5-week pilot. It's incredibly interesting. So there are myriad ways that purpose was articulated, developed, and then community members were coming together to talk about different initiatives, to get to advise each other on career opportunities. A few of the folks were talking about actually starting an incubator for a very specific segment of the population. So it was really interesting to see it kind of playing out in real time. But I don't think that a community host is in any position to sort of define define purpose for a particular member.
Damn you, Bill. I think that's a great point. I like it because really we can talk about the idea of trying to understand the purpose for members, and we can try to create a space that encourages that. But we can't get in anybody's head, and it's worth pointing out sort of what you hinted at there is that one community can have multiple purposes. So people can get all sorts of different purposes based on where they are personally in their lives, what they're tackling right now. So you might say your community has a purpose, but within that goal, that existence, is all these fractured purposes and understandings and experiences with the community based upon where those people are. So you may just have kind of a general good of what your community is, but then people will apply their own purpose to it and find it, and you'll never be able to think of a lot of those purposes.
So how can we create? Let's talk about creating community experiences that are less static.
I think it'd be helpful if Bill defines static here. You use the word in the article, Bill. What do you mean by a static experience?
Thanks. I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, I mean, so part of this was a reaction to the adoption of. I've seen a couple of platforms trying to just kind of wholesale rip off the Facebook feed and call that sort of interactivity and engagement without really nailing any sort of personalization or context. So I would assert, and I realize I'm going out on a limb here, but if you look at a lot of community experiences, including some that I've designed, the interactivity is really at the sort of the messaging level, which is often hidden, and then when that is surfaced via some sort of activity stream, unless that activity stream is really well designed, so it's keying in on your express interests or your social graph on that particular community. It's kind of just a lot of noise, right? So how can we start to tune those, those experiences to really key in on, more of your profile and more, contextual information about you and your graphs to make the experience a little more rich? That's what I meant.
Cool. Yeah. So. Kind of a similar experience for everyone versus a custom experience. I think I love that you mentioned activity streams because I think that's an area where a lot of community software can do a lot better. Just the idea that we have all this data, we sit on a mountain of data for all of our members, things they've liked, people they've become friends or contacts with, posts they've made, posts they've responded to, and I love to see software companies use that data to serve more custom tailored recommendations as opposed to just the generic, here's the latest X, here's the featured X. I'd love to see something like that with software, and I've told software companies this, as I'm sure you have too. It's just the idea that Facebook has this, and a lot of the big social networks have these amazing algorithms. Sometimes they're bad. Like I don't really want Instagram to chop up my feed, really. I wish they'd let me turn it off. But in Facebook's case, I like how they sort the data, sort the information for me to make it more custom to the people that I really, really want to see. So, I would love to see that from community software. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that idea of like serving up, like you said, recommending like, hey, here's some content within the site that maybe will help you discover based on things you've been posting, and that'd be pretty sweet.
Does the static experience relate at all to in-person community? Do you think? Just throwing that out there. Is that relevant at all to that discussion?
I mean, I think it's relevant in the sense that I'm surprised. I continue to be surprised by communities not taking advantage of, their geographic footprints to encourage more, face-to-face meetups that complement community activity. So yeah, I think I think offline, obviously, it's incredibly important. I don't know why communities aren't investing more in that. Back to the sort of comment about being static. The other thing around model development is, and again, this is kind of, at least for me, early days with thinking about purpose as a key driver of a member journey and developing sort of models and stages for particular journeys based upon the community. But if you can imagine, like a 5-stage purpose-driven model for a particular member's maturity, think about the rich experiences you could start to hang off of that model, employing things like reputation management and maybe even game mechanics to tease them down the model, start to match them with other members who could help mentor them or that potentially they could mentor, delivering the right content at the right time to help them with a purpose-driven journey. At the end of the day, like, I think that's what excites me about trying to apply purpose into a community leadership or maturity model.
Patrick, when you mentioned the offline, we were actually talking about that in an education perspective a couple days ago. One of my friends who used to be a teacher was telling me that she, when she was a new teacher, she was always taught to tailor the class to the actual students as the year went on and as they grew and as she saw where they were at. And one of the teachers who was near retiring that she encountered, she saw her at the beginning of the school year, and she was actually printing off every single worksheet for the entire year at the beginning of the school year, before she had ever met the kids or knew where they were going to be. And so that kind of reminded me of that, because I think if you're doing a lot of offline activities, you should definitely be conscious of what's top of mind for the community when you're planning it. Maybe there's a recent event or a recent hot topic or something that's going to change maybe what you plan to be the content for that month versus maybe what should be the content for that month.
Yeah, I was homeschooled, so everything was tailored to me. I was one-on-one, but yeah, I mean, I get it. I think there's the idea that cookie cutter planning results in cookie cutter experiences. So if you treat everyone the same and give them the same experience, then you'll speak to this percent of the population that really responds well to that experience, but then you miss out on the X percent that you could have been more tailored to.
I just want to bring back real quick just to talk about why there isn't more offline experiences or kind of in person, and one of the things that I know I've found being involved in different online communities is as soon as I meet those people literally in the flesh, it just strengthens those bonds so much more, I personally recognize that it's still through the community that I have these lifelong friends now, just kind of, I think that online offline experience is just so important.
Yeah, we recently did this thing where we encouraged our community members to share their Magento moment where they first felt the actual an actual connection with the community. And almost every single one of them was about an offline event. Almost every single one, even though most of them had met online first, it was almost always an offline event. If not, then it was some tweet or something on the way to an offline event. So it's kind of crazy.
I'm sorry. All right, so question number 5, moving us along here, we're at about the halfway mark, is how can we help community members achieve their purpose within communities?
So at Healthy Union, we actually have a pretty helpful tool for figuring out what people are looking for in the community, and I think that knowing what they're looking for obviously is something that's necessary for us to help them achieve it. But what we do is basically, well, it's a much more in-depth thing, but one of the sections of the community segment or community assessment is segmenting the population into different segments, and assessing like what it is that they're looking for. So for example, with asthma, we had people whose asthma was not well controlled and they were looking for solutions, so they were looking for information and support. Then we had other people who had very well controlled asthma and wanted to share their information and knowledge and experience with others in order to help them better control their asthma. And so being able to, well, knowing what they're looking for and identifying that before we launch any community has been really helpful for us in helping them achieve that purpose, because we get to see it in the first place and know what they're looking to do, using what they're looking to use the community to do.
I think kind of. Oh, go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say, and do you sort of, how do you sort those people out? Like, do you identify, like, when they come into the community, is there some sort of prompt or some sort of sorting of people based upon what they're looking for, their experience, or do you reach out manually, or what have you done to sort of build that in?
So we actually do it by just reading through tons of conversations going on in other communities, because we do it before we launch our own. And so other communities that, for example, surrounding asthma, we looked and saw what people were talking about, what kind of questions they were asking, what they were sharing, just basically reading a ton of those conversations. And we just kind of in our heads estimated what the segments would be. It's not really an exact science, I would say. It's just more what we're getting from our reading.
And then are you building content on your site that kind of attracts those people through search, let's say, and kind of funnels them into the right place? So if you're looking to share or you're looking to deal with a certain problem, they get onto your site and then you can filter them into the right discussions, that sort of thing?
Sort of. Well, we definitely strategize our content based on those segments. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Bill.
No. That's an awesome question. And that's exactly, what I was talking about with regard to context, right? It's that sort of higher level matching that helps make meaning a little quicker. Again, back to the Life Reimagined example, we're considering, as part of our scale community launch, actually doing, it's essentially instructor-led purpose development before letting people into the community at large. So this would be, essentially a class that you take and a workshop that you go through to get to a certain level of competency with the information and get to a certain level of definition of your purpose and intent before being led into the community, which I realize is a pretty high bar for entry, and it's by far the most arduous task I've ever asked anyone to do before coming into a community. But we're experimenting with it now to see how much it pays off down the line. And so we may restrict, some parts of the community to people who have gone through the process, so some, content sections and maybe some forums or groups, and then have like a general population of people who are just, more there for discovery or reading. But that's one model that we're considering right now.
I think that's really interesting because, community is so big and there's so many types of communities out there. Like there are huge mainstream generic communities that couldn't hope to handhold people through the process, right? And so for them it's more automation. Maybe they have some people who can reach out individually and welcome people and kind of find out what they're about. But if you're really trying to grow a specific community in a specific niche, like B2B, obviously, if you're talking about clients that are paying you a lot of money, you can afford to handhold them. Like you can afford to talk to them and give them this class and take them to the community. Or if you're trying to do something geographic or local, where you have, let's say, a smaller group of people who you're trying to help with a specific problem, like Jen did with RipLB, where they have people with addiction problems who they're kind of guiding in to get help. You have this small niche group where maybe they wouldn't even find the place, or maybe they don't know, or maybe they're just kind of timidly interested. And so when they show any interest at all, then you're like, well, come on in, and how can I help you? And you really do hold their hand through the process and help them become a member of the community or help them get whatever it is that they're seeking. I know in your case you're dealing with what AARP is a part of the Life Reimagined project, so you have older citizens, right, that you're talking about, right, Bill?
Yeah, the targets go Gen X up. But
okay, no millennials.
Yeah. No, well, they're actually we're a couple in the pilot. I don't want to get too age specific.
Yeah. I don't want to push in that box. But yeah, there's different core audiences, different core groups that might approach community differently. And so for some of those groups, and especially if you have the resources, you can really kind of get custom with them, which is great and powerful.
Agreed.
Jen, I gave you a RipLB plug there, and you don't even jump in with anything?
Thanks, Patrick. No, that was awesome.
Thought you'd have a story or something. Okay.
So, what happens when a participant no longer feels like they need the community?
I love this topic. I like people to graduate. I like people to move on. I like people to feel like they did something and we gave them something and we're a part of their story. When people talk about keeping people in their community, I don't know. I don't like it. I mean, I'm not collecting people. I'm not collecting souls. It's not a commitment curve dungeon. I think we need to let people get out of the communities and achieve things. And eventually, it's like the way some of these people talk. It's like Moses to the Pharaoh, like, let my people go. And I don't know about anyone else, but I don't want to be the Pharaoh. Like, I don't need any plagues. I'm good. So I think when we talk about the idea of models and curves and ladders and steps and escalators and elevators, like, it's all great stuff, but make sure there are some convenient exits along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I look at it sort of from both sides. So, like as a manager, when you hire, you're in some context, your goal is to essentially make yourself irrelevant, right? To replace yourself. And I can see a community's role, being, as Patrick said, to graduate a member to a level of competency or self-support that they're good. I mean, the other side of that coin is, are there ways to expand the offerings of the community so that you're, relevant over a longer term or cycle?
Federated communities, right, Bill?
Yeah.
I read the article.
I'm glad, thank you.
I like the idea. I mean, so is the idea that do you have multiple communities that kind of meet people at different stages, or how do you see that working?
Well, I mean, it's more around, because I've done a lot of B2B or enterprise communities, and it's more around, there are very few instances where one vendor can serve a whole customer, if you will, right? Like even with someone like Autodesk, right? Like you're typically, when I was at Autodesk, like typically customers were in the software most of their workday, right? So we had a really unique position and opportunity to sort of think about how we might be of service, like for most of their workday. But every aspect of a say an industrial designer's life is not served by Autodesk products. So like where are the gaps where maybe we could partner with like a magazine site or that has a community, or another vendor in the space that has a community, to create a more sophisticated offering, or at least make more elegant handoffs between communities that we know they're going to anyways because of web traffic. So that that's just one example from a past employer, but I just see, like, look at the number of small business communities out there. Like, so there's so many communities targeting small businesses, right? So one could maybe assert that some level of partnership or at least weaving together a larger network might make sense. The same with topics around, say, elder caregiving or even health, right? Like there's so many like larger topics that could be served by mostly non-competitors, but maybe even competitors coming together to form a larger network, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be clear. I'm not like, here's the door, I kick him out. Like,
right.
I want it to be copacetic. Like, I want it to make sense. And so I think it's great. I mean, I think again, it's like different models, different things. I love collaboration. We talk about this in the community space, different organizations collaborating, getting together. Do you think I don't know, is it something? It's so hard to get companies to collaborate like that, to admit that they're not part of the whole cycle, isn't it?
No, it's definitely a challenge, but I would say, if you could start to show at least some economic value from, some of the metrics that we were talking about in the pejorative earlier, but, potentially showing that people are sticking around longer, there's a higher level of satisfaction, there's a higher predisposition to be an advocate for the network or federated communities versus, the individual communities, you could turn the corner. For sure. I have a project I'm working on now. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it, but I hope to be able to prove with at least one specific example in the coming months that this does work, because I'm convinced that this is this is another frontier for us as professionals.
Awesome. I look forward to that. You mentioned health, and Jen works on health. And so, you have these health issues that you're serving people with. When do they get to a point where they're done with the health issue that they just leave? Do you need to start a healthy living community? Maybe for people who, now you don't have that problem anymore. Well, join this community. How do you approach that, that people have kind of solved the problem, so to speak? Obviously there's some conditions that don't go away, but, some hopefully do, right? You want to help people get better.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really interesting question. Unfortunately, most of our conditions are conditions that don't go away. So, for example, migraine or rheumatoid arthritis. However, the hope is, we have tons of articles and tons of prompts for the community that are like, hey, what are your best tips for dealing with foot pain, or how do you deal with COPD when showering? So the hope is that they're getting stuff where they definitely benefit and grow stronger. If that's what if that's what they're looking to do. Some people just want to come and kind of commiserate or vent or talk about how hard it is. But for those that are looking to get helpful, take an empowered stance on their health, then we're definitely for that. If somebody in the asthma community were to be able to better manage their asthma and not need to come to the forums anymore, I think that would be totally a win. I think that would be great. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how we see it.
It does. I see what you did there. You pick conditions that don't go away, so you can just keep these people on there forever. You're evil. I didn't know that, but
Jen, I'm curious when so let's say it is asthma, right? And someone learns how to handle their condition a little bit better. Do you ever find people who still want to feel involved in those communities, almost as mentors, if you will, to everyone else?
Absolutely. So that's actually one of the segments that we discovered when we were doing our community assessment is we called them information givers, because it was people who had gotten control of their asthma and wanted to give back to the community and say, this is how I've dealt with it. I think we've also seen the same thing. Actually, my coworker Kelly works on Hep C, but I've heard them talk about how with Hep C, there is a cure that works for some kinds of Hep C, and so people who have been cured do want to come back and still be part of the community. They share their story. So it's a really interesting situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost they're like alumni.
Yeah, and even people who aren't necessarily gone. It's like they're part of your story. They can come back. They're part of the alumni. They're part of the aspiration of, this person was a member here, look at what they did now. So even the idea of someone leaving your community that leaves positively, they're not really necessarily gone. Their contributions are there, their stories there, and they can always come back. So it's not necessarily that they're dead and gone, but I think it's a healthy part of community to understand that.
Yeah, I remember writing about this a couple months ago because so often we focus on retention, and sometimes you just have to be realistic that maybe you're no longer fulfilling that purpose in their lives. Maybe they're working with your software and they've moved to a new role where they're no longer working with your software, and so it just doesn't make sense. Although I will say one of our most active community members no longer works with our software during his day job at all. He just found so much help from our community when he was learning that it's so important for him to keep coming and giving back, which was really interesting, just that shift from consuming and then contributing, from needing the help to actually wanting to just come back and give back. But yeah, there's so many situations that you don't even know about, whatever they could be going through in their personal lives too, that might just have them step away from it, and that's okay.
No, it's not, the silence said. Sorry.
Fine, whatever.
Okay, Jerry.
So, Bill, you also talked in your article a little bit about how companies can work together with communities to refine their purpose as an organization. You could maybe expand on that a little bit about how basically when working with your community it can actually help you grow as a company as well.
Yeah, so the catch here is, I would say the larger and more established the company is, the less malleable their purpose is going to be. So, I look at examples of kind of relatively newer companies that are really communities as great examples of just really tight feedback loops that guide the sort of corporate mission, vision, and direction. So there's a small community of hardware hackers called Hackster.io, and this is just a community around projects based upon open source hardware. and they're doing an amazing job. They're growing by leaps and bounds. They just announced a partnership with Make Magazine at Maker Faire, and they have a really tight feedback loop with their community of makers around kind of what they're all about, where they're going, and how they serve the larger community. I just think they're a really interesting and cool example. A slightly more established model is, a client of mine, Givoto, it's essentially on-demand design resources from the crowd. They're based in Berlin. They've been around for about 7 years. They've done work for basically anybody that you can think of, but because they're in Western Europe, we haven't heard of them very much stateside. And they're all about letting the community kind of guide their business. And in fact, they actually, as part of their design challenges, so they'll do a challenge for someone like, say, Starbucks, and there will be a prize for the sort of best design solutions, and the community itself actually helps to decide who gets the funds based upon their contribution to the project. This isn't like $1 or $2. This is like, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars being distributed. And Bastian, their founder, has told me like his ultimate goal is to, for the core community members, like he wants them to be able to make a living as a designer just from the community participation, which I think is an amazing goal. So there you have sort of individual purpose and corporate purpose, very much aligned in the community.
Well, so that brings us to the end of our pre-written questions, and actually, as we looked on Twitter, although we did have a question about how many tacos you could eat in one sitting, that's about the extent
14.
of
14.
Interesting. I was thinking, yeah, for me, I was like,
I thought I had
dozen.
Are we talking Taco Bell tacos, or are we talking like real taco truck tacos that are not as
Taco
good?
Bell tacos, I can definitely eat a dozen.
Yeah, although they're kind of gross.
Yeah.
But they do in a pinch. But like taco.
I went taco eating contest in high school, FYI.
Are you
Sorry to
serious?
interrupt you, Bill.
Wow.
But
No,
I
no,
thought that was
Jen.
important.
Interrupt
Wait, Jen, what did you say? I missed that. What?
I won a taco eating contest in high school. It was just between two people, but I seriously still won it. So.
Did you get a trophy or a T-shirt or anything? Because that's awesome.
No, it was more just pride.
Pride.
Just
And that's,
pride.
I hope that's on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, you gotta leave out the two-person thing.
It
though.
will be now.
I mean, it was great into the two-person thing, because I once did a modeling competition. No joke. I don't talk about this, but I won. But I beat the other guy. Like I crushed him. So I won that. But I don't need to say it was 1-2.
Good point. I'll leave that out next time. You're right. But the guy was huge. The guy I was going against was huge. Just so.
David and Goliath.
So you guys
I love
Nice
it.
job.
Yeah.
You can say it was just down to the two of us, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
And it takes the reader on a journey, or it takes the listener on a journey where they think, oh boy, down to the final round,
love it.
obviously.
Yes.
Do you guys have any questions for each other since we're hanging out here?
How do you feel about convincing businesses of this, Bill? And Jen or anybody, like the idea of this whole thing. I mean, it's definitely, I guess, more the touchy-feely side of the community, right? I think it's easy to be colder and say like, the metrics are there to kind of keep people on the page, and so why shouldn't we do certain things, or why should we pass people off? Why shouldn't we keep them in that place? Are you seeing resistance, or what do you think of the prospect of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I once described, when I was feeling particularly snarky, the sort of executive's view of the community as a unicorn that you could just punch in the mouth anytime you wanted to, and it pooped out magical content and value. And I've always wanted to like just go on Fiverr and get that sort of illustrated for a T-shirt. So yeah, I mean, anything that generally costs effort or money that an executive hasn't thought of, they need to be brought along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I think, and I caveat this by saying, look, I get that when we start to talk about purpose, it gets woo-woo really quickly, right? And so what I don't want to do is try to start a conversation where, I am incredibly sanctimonious about the topic of purpose, that it's incredibly off-putting, that it's some sort of moral obligation or spiritual obligation to do so. Because I think, with all of that said, I think it's incredibly important, and if we work together, or some of us work together to prove out the model, it could be incredibly impactful. I personally feel like the things that I'm working on are going to push community activity and value beyond any reputation management system or gamification system that I've seen to date. And I worked with a lot of them. I've written vendors very big checks to explore topics like using game mechanics for onboarding, using game mechanics to improve performance of support communities, using game mechanics or reputation to develop federated reputation models. Like, I'm not just sitting here pontificating. I am doing a bit of that, but not 100% of that. I'm convinced this model is valuable. It hasn't been fully explored, and I personally intend to explore it to its fullest over the next year to 2 years. And I would love to have people join me on that journey.
No, you've got me on that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's kind of a long time building. I mean, I think community and this idea of purpose, it's always been there. I want to say in some form or another. I think community started as purpose, like going back to like the well, and going back to the ancient days. Like, community has purpose, it has meaning, it has reason. And I don't know if it's a case of the marketers ruin everything, or whatever you might want to call it. But there's a natural moment of business. Business peak, where business of community becomes there's such a peak moment where it gets squeezed to such an extent that I think it's necessary to correct. So I think that this sort of thing could be the moment that it corrects and possibly unlocks even further potential for community. I don't know if that sounds crazy.
Oh, all right. Well, if we always say sometimes if we just run out of stuff to say on a Friday, it's okay to we come under budget for the show. And thanks, guys, for a great Friday. Thanks for hanging out with us. Please enjoy your weekends. Oh, I thought you were going to say something, and then I heard myself.
Sorry, apparently I'm causing echo, so apologies for that, you guys. Yeah, I mean, I thought this was an awesome conversation. If anyone wants to continue it, please comment on the article on my blog, and we can get, more conversations going around it. I'll be publishing as we get results from the research that we're doing at Life Reimagined over the next couple of months. And Jen and Patrick, I mean, I know you guys are, interested in the topic and actively developing communities around this as well. So, all I would ask is let's keep the conversation going.
I'll keep attacking people who use the words diction and habit forming. I'll keep burning those bridges behind me, so don't worry about it.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, have a great weekend, and we will see you all online and next Friday. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you
so much. Bye.